morning, boys and girls. We're going to finish up with our Jabez story. I'm not going to finish it. We're going to keep working on it. But it starts out, it says, "Where's Jabez?" Maybe you remember the Where's Waldo books. Perhaps you used to hunt for that funny-looking guy wearing the red and white striped shirts who was always lost in the middle of a huge crowd. On every single page, Waldo was hidden somewhere in the midst of the hundreds, maybe thousands of people, animals, and stuff. Readers would search every inch of each illustration until they finally spotted him. Well, that's kind of like Jabez. He's tucked back in the Bible in the middle of the Old Testament, in the middle of 1 Chronicles, a book that hardly anyone ever reads it, because it's mostly a bunch of names, like boring lists. I bet you never ever opened this book in the Bible before. If the book like 1 Chronicles was written today, it might sound like this is Donna and John Davis, and they had 2 kids named Joshua and Amanda, and then Amanda had 3 kids named Nicholas and Megan and Hannah, and Amanda's brother Joshua and the 3 kids are named Alexander and Tyler and Zach and yada yada yada, blah blah blah. Not exactly a page turner, but it's even, you aren't excited about it here, huh? But it's even worse than that, because in 1 Chronicles they had these strange names that sounded like diseases or something that somebody sneezed when they said their name. The point is, in the middle of all this long, boring list of names, thank you for your kiss, you find this poor Jabez just stuck in the middle, kind of like Waldo, except for it's not simply his name listed there, it's all with all the others. No, here's where it gets a little more interesting. Jabez gets his whole story told right in the middle of all these boring lists. Kind of mysterious, isn't it? Now, you might be wondering, so what exactly is Jabez's story? Well, I'm glad you asked. As you remember, his story starts out by announcing that Jabez is more honorable than his brothers. And the word honorable means several things, all good, of course. It means that Jabez lived a good and upright life, or that he was an important or wealthy man, that people who knew him gave him honor. That all sounds pretty good, doesn't it? But life probably didn't start out well for Jabez. The next line tells of how his mother named him. Jabez because he was born in pain. You see, the name Jabez means pain, and that suggests something is hurtful. When Jabez was born, now, everyone can be a nuisance sometimes, but how could you, or would you like being called pain every day? That would be bad, wouldn't it? 24/7, being called pain. Jabez didn't let this tough beginning start and stop him, though he knew that because in a long line, the next time, he would hear a prayer to God, and he would give a prayer to God. He says, "Oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory, that your hand would be with me, and that you would keep me from evil, that I may not cause pain." When you think about it, that's quite a broad and bold prayer, isn't it? What made Jabez think God would do all these great things for an ordinary guy, an everyday guy like him? Well, for a guy whose name is Pain, but you know what? God did it. He answered Jabez's prayer. Pause and consider that fact. If it's just you and me, this guy Jabez, he's an ordinary guy. And yet, there's something special about him. What was it? Because of his name? We know Jabez's life started out to be some problems and have problems. Who doesn't have the problems? Sometimes our problems may seem so overwhelming that it keeps us from doing something really great with our lives. Maybe like Jabez, we don't like our name. Or maybe it's an old-fashioned name like Bartholomew. Or some, mean kid called you Barface for short. Well, perhaps you don't like the way you look, and you wish you were taller or shorter, or you don't like the freckles you have, or the braces, or your glasses, or maybe a family had problems and maybe your parents got divorced, or suddenly you fell torn in two, or perhaps you get teased at school, or something that you can't do anything about. Well, guess what? These haven't changed all as much since the time in Jabez time. We all have problems, and we all have situations in our lives that seem totally unfair. But if we follow Jabez's example, we won't let the problems become giant brick walls that block our way. You see, Jabez faced his problems head on. He came before God and he did a very brave thing. He asked God to do something completely radical in his little ho-hum life. And that's when Jabez's life changed. That little prayer made a gigantic difference in his life. Let's take a closer look at that prayer. Oh, that you shall bless me indeed and enlarge my territories, that your hand would be with me and that you would keep me from evil. So what's up with those 4 simple requests? Sure, they sound good and nice, but what makes them so special? What's the big deal? Can you see it? Maybe not yet. That's what we're going to look into. So I'll read on next week and I'll show you how simple praying this little prayer can turn your life into something really big. That sounds exciting, doesn't it? What do you think? Can I have a kiss? Thank you. See you guys next week.